Unfortunately, I have some difficult news to share with you. I regret to inform you that your role has been eliminated, effective immediately.
I just got laid off and my eyes are swollen from crying. Not too long ago, I got laid off from my role as a product manager, and for 6 weeks from that dreaded day, it was a cycle of job hunting, networking, eating, sleeping, and that's pretty much it. And as you might expect, it was not a fun process. So during that time, my priority was to end the pain as fast as I could. So for this video, I'll be walking you through the 3 things I did that helped me land a job within about a month of getting laid off. So be sure to keep watching if you're interested in seeing real examples of my cold emails that were successful. When I got laid off, the first thing I wanted to do, besides cry for a little bit, was to make a plan. I know it's very type A of me, but I knew I was getting into something that could get very draining very quickly. So I wanted to minimize the potential for burnout by making a plan. But more importantly, what I was really doing was level setting my expectations. So tip number 1 is to map things out so you know what to expect. So the way I thought about the job hunt in my head was kind of threefold: pre-job hunt, application phase, and interviewing phase. Now I recognize there's definitely overlaps between each stage, so let me explain. Essentially, I wanted to have a rough idea of what to prioritize depending on how far along the process I was in. For the pre-job hunt stage, I basically wanted to decide if I should take a break to reset, and if so, how long that should be. For me, I actually only decided to take 1 day off because I was let go right before the holidays, and ideally, I wanted an offer before the Christmas season had the potential to interrupt my recruitment process. But I know for others, taking a break could be really beneficial so that you feel like you're in control when you start the job hunt, as opposed to feeling like you're forced into the process as a result of a layoff. Then comes the application phase and the interviewing phase. The application phase for me was really just everything I needed to do before I started getting interviews. And the interviewing phase was the part of the job hunt when I was actively in interview loops. When I was thinking about how to use my time, there were about 5 different things I felt like I needed to be doing at all times, including browsing job boards, tailoring my resume, networking, preparing for interviews, and resting to avoid burnout. And these are things that I know I would need to do during both the application phase and the interviewing phase, but the amount of time I would allocate to each of these would be different, and that's why I wanted to plan accordingly. So during the application phase, I was expecting to spend the majority of my time browsing job boards and networking, but still allocating some time to tailoring my resume, preparing for interviews, and resting. Now, how I was expecting things to change for the interview phase was that I knew I would need to ramp up my interview prep significantly so that I was spending more than half my time interview prepping. But on the side, of course, I would still browse job boards, tailor my resume, network, and rest. And while I'm going through my plan in a lot of detail right now, in reality, when I was planning things, I was really just mapping things out in a very rough manner in my head. So by no means does this process need to take a lot of time. I think the takeaway here is to just spend some time to recognize and break down all the work that is required for this potentially draining process, just as a way to level set your expectations while being a bit strategic in your approach. Okay, so once I had a plan in place, it was time to execute. I started my application phase by submitting around 30 or so cold applications in about a week. But after being immediately rejected or ghosted from everything, I knew that the spray and pray method was not it, and I would need to pivot my strategy. So I went all in on networking to try to get referrals. Of course, networking is always the easiest if you already have a first or second connection working at the company you're interested in applying to. But if you don't, mastering cold outreach can help pay dividends in the long run. And before I show you some of my messages that worked, I do want to make the caveat that cold outreach is often a numbers game, and some people simply will not respond, even if your message is as fire as it could be. But generally, I've seen the highest response rate when I follow this formula. First, I try to find someone who is most relevant to my needs, and I tailor that message. I'll put on my CIA hat to stalk the people that I want to talk to. Sometimes they're current employees, sometimes they're ex-employees, and sometimes it's someone whose company is not even hiring yet. I try to look for people who have something relevant from their background that I can mention in my message to not only show that I've done my research, but to also highlight some common interests that we may have. Second, I try to make it easy for them to say yes. That essentially just means be clear and reasonable in your ask. If I'm looking for a coffee chat, I'll mention how much time I need and what high-level questions I want to ask. I'll sometimes also offer to send questions offline in case the other person only has the bandwidth to answer questions asynchronously. And if I'm sending a message from LinkedIn, I'll also ask for their availability and their email in that initial message so that I can send a calendar invite and minimize the number of messages that they need to respond to. Really, I just try to make it easy on them. And third is all about getting the basics right. Of course, I try to make my messages as concise as possible. I proofread them to make sure there's no grammar or spelling mistakes. And I also try my best to express genuine praise and gratitude. All right, so here's an example of an email I sent to someone who used to work in a role that I wanted to apply to.
Hi, I recently came across your LinkedIn profile while looking into an open product manager role at this company and saw that you've been busy building Blank. Stumbling across your page has already helped me more than I expected, and I think what you have built at Blank is incredibly powerful, particularly in today's competitive job market. Would you be open to connecting over a 15-minute call? I would love to hear more about your experience on the Blank team and your transition to being a founder. Thank you so much.
So even though this message was sent to an ex-employee, I was actually still able to get a referral because after connecting with this person, they reached out to their previous colleagues on my behalf. But I do want to mention that sometimes cold outreach does boil down to luck. I definitely got lucky. I found someone with an interesting background. I got lucky that they had put their email in their LinkedIn and that they had the bandwidth to respond to me. When I'm less lucky and can't find someone's email, I will either use InMail from LinkedIn Premium or I'll look for people from LinkedIn groups that I'm a part of, because I think not a lot of people know this, but if you're in the same LinkedIn group as someone, you can actually message them for free. If you go into the group, click on show all members and hit the message button directly from there. The last thing I'll suggest is to try to network with more than one person at the same company. This way there's just more opportunities to gain insights that can not only help you get a referral, but can potentially help you throughout the interview process as well. The last thing I did to land a job as fast as I could was to be extremely prepared for my interviews, which is really something that just comes with practice. I personally think that getting an interview is the hardest part, so I like to make sure that once I land an interview, I'm doing everything in my power to get that offer. And as you know, there's a couple different types of interviews to prepare for, but the main ones I've experienced are behavioral interviews and case interviews. For behavioral interviews, I usually start by dedicating some time to simply come up with 10 or so examples from my past experiences that I can speak to in behavioral interviews. And I come up with examples based on certain themes,
Such as leadership, conflict, data-driven decisions, solving a pain point, trade-offs, prioritization, ambiguity, cross-functional collaboration, etc.
A popular framework that I follow is the STAR framework: situation, task, action, result. I'm sure you've heard of it, but I'll bullet point out the main points that I want to hit for each theme. And then from there, I'll practice my answers out loud, either by recording myself in photo booth and watching it over, which is a little bit cringe, or I'll practice with someone in a mock interview. I'll sometimes also ask ChatGPT to generate a list of questions that hit on the same theme so that I can practice tailoring the same example to different questions. For case interviews, preparing for that is a whole beast on its own that would require a separate video, so I won't get too deep into it. But if it's a live case interview, I will practice as much as possible, again, both by myself or with other people I find in my network or in communities such as Lewis Lynn's Slack channel or Stellar Peers. And if it's a take-home case, I just treat it very seriously as if it were my consulting project that I would put in my portfolio or something like that. But for all types of interviews, practice really is key. And just remember that as draining as it is, the confidence and skills that you develop with each practice will not only help you in this current recruiting process, but also in the ones to come in the future. And just speaking from experience, when I was trying to break into product, I was doing 1 to 2 mock interviews every day for 6 weeks straight, on top of studying by myself for several months. And while I kind of killed myself doing that, without that experience, I don't think this job hunt would have been as smooth as it was. Remember that just because you're an excellent product manager doesn't necessarily mean that you're an excellent product manager candidate. So no matter what your experience or background is, if you're not better prepared than other candidates, that just might cost you an offer. So this wraps up the 3 tips that I have to share on how to land a job in this brutal job market. Of course, these aren't the only 3 things I did to land a job. So if you want me to dive deeper into anything, feel free to like this video, leave a comment, and consider subscribing. And as a parting thought, I just want to say that I know the job hunt is a real bitch. So I genuinely wish you the best of luck, and I'm sure your time will come sooner or later. Bye.